There exists a category of understanding that operates just outside the bounds of common conversation. It is not forbidden knowledge, yet it is often approached with caution. This isn't about what is morally wrong, but about what is strategically obscured, concepts that can shift foundational dynamics because they alter perception. Our discussion is not an endorsement of resentment or manipulation. It is an exploration of underlying patterns that influence human interaction, patterns that, once recognized, change one's engagement with the world. This recognition can replace uncertainty with clarity. And that shift in awareness is precisely why such understanding is seldom promoted openly. Within private reflections and unguarded conversations, there exists a subtle apprehension. This unease isn't rooted in physical threat, but in the power of realization. It emerges when an individual begins to perceive the layers beneath social courtesy, beyond idealized narratives, and behind the personas people present. This discernment can alter relational equilibriums, making the once invisible structures of influence suddenly apparent. Historical strategists did not focus on sentiment. They analyzed control, perception, and method. Principles applicable in one arena of life often find resonance in another, even where competition is publicly denied. From a young age, a common narrative is instilled that relational exchanges are fundamentally transparent, emotions are invariably pure, and intentions are consistently clear. This framing, however well-intentioned, can be the primary mechanism that keeps complex systems from being questioned. In matters of connection, the party operating on unquestioned belief often finds itself at a disadvantage. The individual who observes and comprehends the underlying mechanics tends to navigate with more agency, not through deception, but through a clearer understanding of how choices are authentically made. Emotional responses do not always align with a linear moral framework. They are frequently guided by stimuli, reinforcement, and strategic absence. Deep interest is rarely sparked by what is perpetually available. It is often ignited by the possibility of loss. This is rarely stated outright, but predictability can diminish magnetic appeal. This isn't because people enjoy confusion, but because the human mind's engagement wanes when it perceives total safety and absolute control. Excessive comfort can dampen curiosity, just as obvious desperation can. A strategic thinker from history noted that a leader who becomes entirely predictable becomes vulnerable. A parallel exists in personal dynamics. An individual who offers everything too readily, explains themselves excessively, and pledges depth before it is mutually earned may believe they are acting correctly, but they often inadvertently diminish their own perceived value. There is a significant distinction between being a person of integrity and being merely convenient. A convenient presence is often valued only so long as it makes no demands. A person aware of their own worth does not plead for acceptance, chase external validation, or disclose their entire narrative prematurely. Maintaining a degree of personal mystery isn't about concealing one's character. It is about understanding the pace of revelation. If you present your complete self to everyone immediately, you risk becoming ordinary. And what is ordinary is rarely the subject of profound desire. The less comfortable reality is that many reactions operate on a preconscious level, occurring before logic or morality intervene. Attraction doesn't first inquire, is this equitable? It wonders, is this compelling? The same historical strategist observed that people judge more by appearances than by deep understanding because surfaces are easier to assess. In relational dynamics, how you present yourself often carries more immediate weight than your private feelings. Those who learn to manage their presence, their strategic absence, their silence, and their timing can exert influence without explicit requests. This form of awareness can be unsettling because it dismantles comfortable naivety. It demonstrates that being constantly available is not inherently a virtue. It can be a tactical error. Attempting to convince someone of your worth often indicates a misunderstanding of the fundamental dynamic. Authentic value is not debated, it is perceived. If you are over-explaining, over-justifying, or over-proving, you have often already lost footing. This is not a reflection of cruelty, but of intrinsic human nature. What is often met with resistance is not strength itself, but emotional awareness. It is the composed individual who does not panic over rejection, who does not attempt to purchase affection with frantic effort, who does not make a single person the epicenter of their existence. Such an individual cannot be easily controlled by the fear of loss. They make choices. They do not plead. They observe. They do not react impulsively. They understand that the party demonstrating less overt need often retains more agency in decision-making. The strategic teachers of history did not instruct people to harbor hatred. They taught people to see reality clearly, and seeing reality can be painful because it dismantles illusions. The illusion that affection is always mutual, that good intentions guarantee favorable outcomes, that being the right person at the wrong time carries no cost. It does, and the cost is often being overlooked. The world does not reward your intent. It responds to your accurate assessment of situations. Those who grasp this early often experience less distress later. This knowledge does not make you cold. It can make you more integrated, an individual who does not rely on others' approval to feel worthy. This is why such a person becomes formidable, not through violence or abuse, but through being ungovernable by needless emotional pressure. This individual does not bend from unmet emotional demands, does not accept scraps of attention, and does not adopt roles that diminish their value. They know when to stay, when to leave, and, most importantly, when silence communicates more effectively than words. This mode of being is uncommon, and when it appears, it highlights the fragility of many unchallenged social narratives. It demonstrates that many rules function only for those who never question them. Thus, there exists an unspoken preference that many never reach this level of clarity, because once seen, it cannot be unseen. The dynamics continue, but you are no longer participating blindly. When a person realizes that relationships are defined less by words and more by consistent behavior, an internal shift occurs. This isn't arrogance, it is lucidity. They begin to notice patterns once ignored: who withdraws when given excessive priority, who engages more actively when they perceive potential loss, who tests boundaries under the guise of other motives. The strategist warned that the gravest error is confusing language with intent. Language often protects appearances. Actions reveal strategy. Few admit this openly. Attraction does not flourish where everything is guaranteed. The human mind responds to contrast, managed uncertainty, and respectful challenge. When everything is readily available, nothing feels uniquely valuable. When everything is predictable, nothing is intensely desired. This isn't a commentary on any gender. It is human nature. The distinction is that few accept this truth without resisting it through moralistic arguments that only weaken their own position. The individual who understands this ceases over-explanation. They know that feeling compelled to justify oneself often signals a defensive posture. Historical wisdom advised that a leader should never appear weak, even when practicing patience. In a modern context, patience isn't about waiting for messages. It means not acting from anxiety. It means maintaining your composure even when your ego seeks immediate validation. It means not allowing interest to decay into desperation. There is a specific juncture where many lose their footing, the moment they feel they might lose a connection. In response, they start giving too much, agreeing too much, promising too much. They believe extra effort demonstrates value, but it often reveals fear, and fear, even when unspoken, is sensed. The energy shifts, and the party who senses it assumes a stronger position in the dynamic. True influence is rarely announced. It is demonstrated through behavior. The person who panics shows dependence. The one who remains calm signals that they have alternatives. An individual who understands this does not threaten to leave. They are simply willing to leave if necessary. That willingness alters everything because it removes the other party's sense of absolute control. From that point, the interaction is no longer one-sided. Another avoided truth is role reversal. Many become emotionally predictable while expecting the other party to remain spontaneous. This creates imbalance. The one who always initiates, always reconciles, always maintains contact becomes the emotional custodian. And the custodian is rarely the object of intense desire. They become useful, not electrifying. Historical insight would suggest being necessary is not the same as being respected. And respect is the invisible foundation of lasting attraction. When a person stops striving to be chosen and begins exercising their own choice, the dynamic shifts. not due to arrogance, but because they no longer accept anything less than basic respect. They observe actions, not just words. They note inconsistencies. They do not excuse disrespect in the name of hope. They do not confuse sporadic attention with genuine interest. For someone accustomed to setting the pace, this can be unsettling. What is often feared is not rejection, but irrelevance. The individual who understands this does not compete for validation. They know that anyone competing for approval has already ceded authority. They do not over-explain to be accepted. They position themselves to be respected. And when respect is absent, they disengage quietly. That silent distance resonates more powerfully than any argument. The strategic mind cautioned that the fundamental mistake is believing others operate by your rules simply because you do. The world functions on incentives, not moral contracts. When you offer everything without reciprocity, interest fades. When you maintain standards, curiosity ignites. When you give yourself completely without boundaries, you create one-sided dependency. When you maintain self-respect, you create a healthy tension, and tension can fuel attraction. This is why this understanding isn't widespread. It disrupts comfortable systems where one party leads and the other perpetually follows. When an individual realizes they need not convince, beg, or insist, they stop being predictable. Unpredictability, when rooted in inner stability, becomes potent, not manipulative, just potent. This person does not play juvenile games or feign disinterest. They simply do not act from emotional desperation. If reciprocity exists, they engage. If there is confusion, they step back. No dramatic confrontations, no lengthy speeches. The strategist would call this conserving energy, using only what is necessary, never more than the situation demands. This is the moment many realize, too late, that they have lost control of the narrative. They can no longer trigger easy emotional reactions, can no longer predict the other's responses, can no longer obtain guarantees without offering something authentic in return. When that happens, the balance of power shifts. Matters become truly substantive when a person ceases seeking emotional approval and starts operating from self-possession. This isn't coldness, it is internal stability. The thinker noted that one who governs themselves can navigate all else more effectively. There is nothing more volatile than emotions, where promises are made without thought and broken without warning. An individual who understands this does not anchor their stability on others' reactions. They build it on their own principles. What is rarely taught is that profound social influence lies not in speech, but in the ability to not react immediately. Most operate on reflex. A message arrives, they reply. A provocation occurs, they counterattack. Silence emerges, anxiety builds. The person who breaks this pattern controls the tempo without uttering a word. Silence, from someone who feels no need to explain themselves, carries more impact than any debate. The deepest driver is often not fear of consequence, but fear of uncertainty. When a person stops reacting as expected, they compel the other party to make the next move. The one who moves first reveals their intentions. This disrupts subtle power games built on confusion. Many connections persist only because one side accepts confusion in exchange for hope. But when that hope dissolves, only reality remains. Genuine interest or mere convenience, real presence or ingrained habit, authentic desire or simple comfort. Not everyone is prepared to confront that distinction. Contemporary culture frequently repeats a myth that communication solves every issue. The strategic mind would find that amusing. Communication is effective only when influence is balanced. When it is not, communication often exposes vulnerability. Explaining your feelings to someone demonstrating no emotional accountability does not forge connection. It grants them an advantage. Information is power only when you control its timing and manner of disclosure. If you reveal too much, you become predictable. And predictability is a strategic liability. An individual who understands this does not shut down emotionally. They simply choose with care. They do not share their entire narrative with everyone immediately. They look for consistency before investing deeply. They do not mistake intense initial emotions for sustainable commitment. They know enthusiasm is common, but consistency is rare, so they are not easily impressed. This quietly alters the dynamic because the person who is not readily impressed often becomes the one being evaluated, not just the evaluator. It was said that a leader should rely more on respect than affection. The same applies here. Affection can fluctuate, desire can change, but respect endures. Respect is born from clear boundaries. An individual who does not accept disrespect, who does not bargain with their dignity, who does not excuse poor behavior out of loneliness, becomes a formidable presence. They need not shout or threaten. Their posture communicates everything. This is why this mindset is often criticized, labeled as game playing, coldness, or manipulation. To admit its effectiveness is to admit that many choices are less conscious than presumed. The historical strategist was opposed not because he was incorrect, but because he articulated openly what many practice quietly. He did not invent human nature. He merely described it. When an individual understands they do not need to be selected to feel worthy, they become selective, and selectivity is uncommon. What is rare becomes valuable, not because it demands attention, but because it is not available to everyone. This person does not compete for attention. They observe to see who invests effort to remain. This simple change alters the entire emotional dynamic because it requires the other party to leave the comfort zone of passive reception. What is most unsettling is not the loss of external control, but the loss of internal control when the other person does not react as anticipated. Messages don't arrive, explanations aren't offered, availability is no longer assured. This triggers profound insecurity. Someone who comprehends this does not exploit it to be cruel, but neither do they rush to soothe emotions they did not create. They allow the other person to manage their feelings with maturity. The strategist observed that a wise leader lets others expend their own energy. A similar principle applies here. An individual who doesn't engage in emotional games allows inconsistency to reveal itself. They do not chase every ambiguous signal. They observe patterns. And patterns are reliable. If someone wishes to be present, they demonstrate it. If they do not, they generate confusion. The individual who understands this does not insist where they are not genuinely welcome. This clarity is rare because it demands self-control. It means accepting that you may lose people who would only stay if you diminished yourself. It means releasing the fantasy that excessive effort generates love. It does not. It creates unhealthy dependency. And dependency never sustains authentic desire. The person who accepts this truth loses their illusions but gains inner sovereignty. This is why many prefer you never learn this perspective. Once you do, you can no longer be controlled by guilt, urgency, or fear of solitude. You begin choosing based on behavior, not promises. When someone loses the ability to influence you through emotional pressure, they also lose the comfort of predicting your next move. There exists an invisible threshold where the dynamic ceases to be purely emotional and becomes structural. Very few notice when they cross this line. It is the moment an individual stops reacting to emotions and starts acting from principles. Real stability does not originate in passion. It comes from internal consistency. Someone who is calm internally cannot be easily controlled externally. This is deeply uncomfortable for anyone accustomed to leading through emotional turbulence. Most modern relationships persist on slight imbalances. One person waits more, invests more, fears loss more. That person typically ends up giving more than they should, not because they desire to, but because they feel they must. An individual who becomes aware of this perceives a difficult truth. The more someone fears loss, the easier they are to influence. Not through malice, but simply through behavioral dynamics. The one who fears loss acts. The one who does not fear loss observes. The strategic warning was that a leader should never govern from fear of losing their position, because the moment fear of loss enters, they are weakened. The same applies here. When a person fears losing someone, they start negotiating their boundaries, accepting inconsistency, tolerating subtle disrespect, all to retain something that is already slipping away. That reaction, however well-intentioned, often accelerates the loss. When an individual understands that loss is not a threat to their identity, but a natural filter, they become impervious to emotional manipulation. They do not react to tests. They do not defend themselves against provocations. They do not rush to prove their worth when they sense distance. They observe, and silent observation reveals more than any protracted conversation ever could. What most fail to realize is this. Emotional tests are often not measures of affection. They are measures of control. How far will you go? How much will you accept? How much will you tolerate? The person who passes every test by acquiescing fails the most crucial one, the test of self-respect, because someone who accepts everything establishes no boundaries. It was observed that excessive kindness can lead to contempt, not gratitude. And contempt is the beginning of the end. There is a comforting belief that emotional maturity always entails explaining, discussing, clarifying. But the strategic mind knew that over-explaining is an error when the other party shows unequal responsibility. Communication without reciprocity becomes exposure. Exposure without limits becomes vulnerability. What most fail to realize is this. Emotional tests are often not measures of affection. They are measures of control. How far will you go? How much will you accept? How much will you tolerate? The person who passes every test by acquiescing fails the most crucial one, the test of self-respect, because someone who accepts everything establishes no boundaries. It was observed that excessive kindness can lead to contempt, not gratitude. And contempt is the beginning of the end. There is a comforting belief that emotional maturity always entails explaining, discussing, clarifying. But the strategic mind knew that over-explaining is an error when the other party shows unequal responsibility. Communication without reciprocity becomes exposure. Exposure without limits becomes vulnerability. An individual who understands this does not shut down, but they also do not open their deepest emotions to someone who hasn't earned that access. They realize that not every distance needs to be remedied. Some distances are answers. Some are messages disguised as silence. Attempting to chase them doesn't create closeness, it creates exhaustion. A person who has mastered self-governance accepts what is demonstrated, not what is promised. They do not become attached to potential, they respond to reality. Offensive actions often stem from fear or hatred. In relationships, many confusing behaviors originate from fear of losing control. When someone realizes you do not react as expected, you don't plead, justify, or bend, it creates deep insecurity in them, not because you did anything wrong, but because you ceased being predictable. And when something is unpredictable yet calm, it can feel destabilizing. An individual who reaches this level of awareness does not play games. They simply cease being played. They do not fabricate artificial scarcity. They are rare because they do not join every emotional dynamic. They do not promise to stay forever. They offer their presence as long as there is reciprocity. And when that disappears, they depart quietly. This silent exit is more powerful than any emotional appeal, because now the connection must survive on its own merit, not because one person is compelling it to continue. Many connections cannot withstand this. The comfort of being desired without effort vanishes. The guaranteed attention is gone. Now the other party must choose, invest or lose. No games, no excuses, no confusion. The strategic teacher never instructed people to destroy valuable alliances. He taught them not to submit to alliances that weaken them. Thus, the individual who understands this does not reject connection. They reject imbalance. They do not fear being alone, knowing that solitude is preferable to losing oneself piece by piece. This changes everything, because someone who doesn't fear being alone doesn't accept just anything. This is why some say this mode of being should not become too common. There exists an imperceptible moment in every interaction when the outcome is already determined, even without a word being spoken. It is in this silent space that genuine interest is kindled or extinguished. It is not in the rehearsed compliment, the lengthy message, or the attempt to explain your worth. It resides in the interval between actions, in the steadiness of eye contact, the rhythm of your responses, the calm with which you inhabit your own presence. Most individuals lose traction precisely here, trained to believe that connection is about discourse, when in reality, it is about perception. As explored in various texts on social dynamics, the truly influential individual does not convince, they guide. They do not impose through force, but through understanding the emotional rhythm of an interaction. This changes everything. When you grasp this principle, you realize that desire is not something you request or generate by speaking more loudly or poetically. It arises when someone feels you are in command of your own emotions while they are still deciphering theirs. This is not accidental. It is a cultivated internal state. The contemporary individual has often been conditioned toward the opposite error. They react excessively, explain too much, anticipate constantly. When they sense tension, they try to dissolve it. When they perceive distance, they try to fill it. When tested, they justify themselves. They believe this demonstrates kindness, understanding, and evolution. But what is often subconsciously perceived is not kindness, it is instability. It is not care, it is neediness. People do not respond solely to your words, feelings, or thoughts. They respond to what your behavior communicates without permission to be interpreted. There is a profound psychological basis for this. The human brain is highly attuned to nonverbal signals of safety, direction, and self-control. Before conscious attraction forms, an instinctual assessment has already occurred. Your emotional posture indicates whether you are overly predictable, whether you seek validation, whether you fragment under pressure. When an individual shows they need to be constantly understood, accepted, or confirmed, they communicate a fatal flaw, a lack of center, a lack of internal anchor. No one is fundamentally drawn to being the emotional foundation for someone who has not learned to sustain themselves. This exploration is not about lines, tricks, or performance. It is about the silent attitudes that shape perception long before physical touch, before intimacy, before conscious decision-making. These attitudes are rooted in observable, repeatable psychology. They can invert a dynamic without confrontation, without apparent effort, without lengthy explanation. When an individual masters these attitudes, something changes definitively. They stop competing for attention and start being recognized. They do not chase desire. They become the focal point around which desire naturally orbits. Let us be unequivocally clear. This is not about cheap manipulation or artificial personas. It is about internal control, authentic presence, strategic silence, and understanding how emotional dynamics function, so you never again operate from a place of desperate need for approval. The moment you learn to govern your own emotional rhythm, the environment transforms, reactions change, and interactions evolve. Not because others have become different, but because you have finally departed from the commonplace of the individual who talks too much yet communicates little. Attitude 1. Composure that establishes trust. Few realize that the initial test in an interaction rarely comes as direct rejection, that it often arrives disguised as provocation, delayed responses, subtle irony, or sudden shifts in mood. This is the moment where most falter, not because of incorrect words, but because of their reaction. The body tenses, the mind races, the urge to explain, correct, or placate emerges. The individual believes they are resolving the situation when, in reality, they are surrendering what is most closely observed in silence: their emotional stability under pressure. The observing mind does not test to cause harm, it tests to measure. It measures whether you remain integrated when the ground feels unsteady. It measures whether you stay centered when something slips toward chaos. When an individual reacts with irritation, anxiety, or lengthy justifications, they reveal that their internal state is dependent on another's behavior. Emotional dependence is the antithesis of grounded leadership. Research has demonstrated that emotionally stable people are perceived as more attractive and socially influential, not because they are cold, but because they are predictable to themselves and adaptively unpredictable to others. This distinction entirely changes the dynamic. A common confusion arises here. Many believe emotional control is coldness, indifference, or artificial distance. It is not. Emotional control is the absence of automatic reactivity. It is the ability not to expend your energy every time someone presses an emotional button. Zero emotional predictability does not mean an absence of emotion. It means an absence of emotional leakage. An individual does not feel secure when you shut down. They feel secure when they realize nothing external can easily pull you from your center. Tests often function as an unconscious filter. Small tensions are created to observe whether the individual collapses internally or remains whole. The person who over-explains, apologizes for feelings they did not cause, or attempts to please amid conflict communicates something silent and counterproductive: a fear of loss. And where fear of loss resides, there is no emotional leadership, only submission disguised as accommodation. The practical application of this principle begins far from romantic contexts. It begins in the daily training of self-restraint. Minimal responses when emotion surges. Conscious pauses before reacting. Silence when the impulse is to justify, not to create games, but to allow the emotional wave to pass without dictating your action. In intense interactions, the individual who masters this does not try to win the conversation. They sustain their own rhythm. They do not explain, defend, or anticipate. They observe. They breathe. They respond only when the response emerges from clarity, not anxiety. When you operate this way, something almost imperceptible occurs. The tension shifts. The other party senses they cannot easily sway you emotionally. This feeling, even if unarticulated, is interpreted as strength. It is not aggressiveness or arrogance. It is solid emotional presence. The individual who controls themselves communicates, without words, that they are also capable of leading the environment. To the instinctive mind, this is not only attractive, it is disarming. Don't keep this insight to yourself. If this resonates, share this video right now. The algorithm needs to see that this content matters. Your share helps others break free from confusion. Attitude 2. Self-sufficiency that activates engagement. There is a silent signal that is rarely ignored, even when rationalized away. The sense that an individual has a life that continues with or without a specific connection. This is not indifference or contempt. It is internal density. Most fail here because they believe showing interest means reorganizing everything around the other person: schedule, energy, mood, priorities. Gradually, without realizing it, they communicate that the other's presence is the gravitational center of their existence. When that happens, authentic interest begins to fade before it can fully form. The silent error is placing another person at the center of your emotional structure, canceling commitments, always responding immediately, adapting plans, shifting internal priorities to avoid losing approval. The individual believes they are demonstrating value. What is often perceived is the opposite: a lack of personal direction. Attraction does not ignite when you show you have abundant free time. It arises when you show that your time already has an owner, and that owner is your purpose, not external validation. Evolutionary psychology explains this with unambiguous clarity. Research indicates a tendency to value individuals who demonstrate stable internal resources, clear direction, and emotional autonomy. This is not merely about external status or resources. It is about the perception that this person does not lose themselves when someone enters or exits their life. They add, they do not replace. They integrate, they do not depend. Here lies the counterintuitive breakthrough that few accept. The less you need, the more valuable you become. Neediness generates predictability. Predictability diminishes tension. And without tension, there is no catalytic desire. Studies have associated personal independence with higher levels of sustained interest precisely because independence subconsciously activates an engagement trigger. The other party feels they might gain something rare or lose something meaningful, and the brain responds with heightened attention. This does not mean playing games or pretending disinterest. It means living in a way where your life is not on hold for messages, replies, or confirmations. The practical application is simple but requires internal discipline. Never reorganize your emotional agenda to accommodate insecurity. Never adjust your core energy to avoid another's discomfort. Never abandon your routines, commitments, or solid internal states to appear overly available. When you do this, you need not announce your value. Your behavior speaks for you. The self-sufficient individual does not proclaim they are busy, they simply are. They do not explain their priorities, they live them. This creates a silent, powerful asymmetry. While many orbit others, this person remains at the center of their own world. This posture activates something profound in the human psyche: the sense that this individual is not a guaranteed constant, not easily obtained, not readily delivered. Where there exists a possibility of loss, attention follows. Where attention resides, desire finds space to grow. Are you finding value in this deep dive? Then show your support. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every like tells YouTube this content is crucial and helps it reach men who are ready to listen. Don't just watch, engage. Attitude 3. Physical presence that communicates anchored confidence. Before any conversation starts, the body has already spoken. Before any intention is interpreted, posture has delivered its message. Most overlook this, trained to think connection is verbal when, In reality, it is profoundly spatial. How you occupy an environment, how you enter, sit, move, and hold yourself communicates more than any well-crafted sentence. This is precisely where many relinquish influence without awareness. Closed shoulders, rushed movements, nervous microadjustments. Closed shoulders, rushed movements, nervous microadjustments, a constant search for approval in another's eyes. All silently broadcast anxiety, even when the mouth attempts to project confidence. The silent error is reactive body language. The individual reacts to the environment instead of anchoring it. They adapt excessively, shrink, ask for space with their body while trying to claim it with words. The observing mind captures this instantly because the human brain is wired to read signals of status and safety in fractions of a second. There is no neutral body language. You either transmit presence or transmit submission disguised as politeness. Neuroscience confirms this. Studies have demonstrated that open, stable, expansive postures alter not only external perceptions of status, but also the internal state of the person holding them. The body informs the mind, and the mind informs behavior. When an individual occupies space naturally, with deliberate movements and controlled breathing, they signal safety without needing justification. And safety is one of the deepest triggers of genuine interest, even when the reason remains unspoken. Here is the expectation break that confuses many. People feel interest before they understand why rationally. The body responds before logic. A calm, firm, relaxed individual in a social environment draws attention, not because they try to be noticed, but because they do not need to. They do not compete for focus. They sustain presence. While others move excessively to prove something, they move little because they are already comfortable in their own axis. This creates contrast, and contrast creates magnetism. The practical application doesn't require performance. It requires bodily awareness, an open posture, feet grounded, economical movements, steady eye contact that observes more than it seeks return. An absence of microvalidations like nervous laughter, constant adjustments, or excessive reaction seeking. When you slow your body down, the environment often slows with you. When you occupy space without asking for emotional permission, the dynamic shifts. The other party feels they are engaging with someone who does not need to adapt to belong. This type of presence is not learned through motivational speeches. It is trained in silence, repetition, and bodily discipline. When it becomes ingrained, something powerful occurs. You cease being just another stimulus in the environment and become a point of reference. Their body perceives it before their mind articulates it. Here is stability. Here is control. Here is someone who does not need to prove anything. This perception, even without words, carries more weight than any explicit attempt at persuasion. Attitude 4. Strategic silence that fosters curiosity. There is a point where speaking ceases to build connection and starts to dissolve intrigue. Most cross this line unknowingly. Driven by anxiety to seem interesting, intelligent, or distinct, they fill every silence with stories, explanations, unnecessary personal details, unrequested opinions. They believe they are building rapport when, in reality, they are eliminating the primary fuel of attraction, curiosity. Excess information kills tension. Without tension, there is no space for imagination. The silent mistake is confusing presence with verbosity. Insecure individuals talk to reduce the discomfort of silence. Centered individuals use silence to observe, feel, and allow the other party to reveal themselves. The human mind reacts profoundly to this because it struggles to tolerate emotional gaps without attempting to fill them. When you speak excessively, you leave no room for projection. When you are silent at the right moment, the unconscious mind of the other person begins working. Psychology explains this mechanism with precision. The concept of projection describes the unconscious tendency to assign meanings, desires, and fantasies to incomplete stimuli. What is vague becomes fertile ground. What is fully revealed becomes static. When an individual presents as an open book, they eliminate the need for imagination. When they preserve aspects of themselves, not from fear, but by choice, they activate an internal process in the observer that cannot be consciously controlled. Here arises the expectation break that dismantles many myths. Mystery is not performance. It is not playing games or appearing artificially distant. Mystery is economy of information. It is understanding that not everything needs to be said, explained, or anticipated. A confident person does not feel compelled to narrate their life in real time. They allow spaces. They permit pauses. They do not rush to fill silence because they do not feel threatened by it. Research has demonstrated that cognitive gaps increase focus and curiosity precisely because the human brain seeks to complete incomplete patterns. When you answer with clarity but not exhaustively, when you do not deliver everything at once, when you allow silence to exist without haste, something changes in the dynamic. Attention deepens. The mind engages, and what is left unsaid often gains more weight than any rehearsed monologue. The practical application requires self-control, succinct answers when the impulse is to elaborate, stories shared partially without closing all loops, pauses that feel uncomfortable only to those who are not comfortable with themselves. The individual who masters strategic silence does not try to impress or seek applause. They allow curiosity to mature at its own pace. This creates a silent inversion. While many strive to maintain attention, this person becomes the point that generates internal questions. When you learn to use silence this way, the conversation shifts its axis. You stop being the entertainer and become the enigma, not through artifice, but through emotional maturity. The other party senses they have not fully deciphered you, and while that persists, interest does not settle, it grows, because everything not fully accessible often gains perceived value. The individual who understands this does not need to say much to be remembered. They leave an impression precisely in what they choose not to say. If this content is changing your perspective, comment below with the word clarity. Let's build a community of men who choose awareness over confusion. Your comment fuels this channel's mission. Attitude 5. Decisive, respectful direction. At some point in an interaction, progress requires direction, not words, not requests, not emotional negotiations, but calm, assured direction. Many stumble here, confusing respect with hesitation. They wait for excessive signals, seek emotional validation before advancing, ask with their eyes what should be guided with presence. The intention exists, but the congruent energy does not follow. When leadership wavers, interest often retreats, not out of conscious rejection, but due to an absence of instinctive safety. The silent error is asking for emotional permission to move forward. This is not about physical consent, which is explicit and non-negotiable. It is about the internal posture that precedes action. The individual who leads asks the environment less if they can act, and asks themselves more whether they are aligned with the moment. When they seek emotional approval before every step, they communicate insecurity about their own reading of the situation. This is often perceived as a lack of direction. And where there is no direction, there is often no deepening of connection. The behavioral basis of this is clear. Authentic polarity often arises from calm, decisive leadership, not from aggressiveness, and certainly not from passivity. Leading in this context is not about imposing, it is about sustaining. It is about feeling the rhythm of the interaction and guiding it naturally, like someone who knows where they are going. When leadership is serene, the other party's body can relax. When the body relaxes, genuine interest finds space to manifest. Here is the expectation break that dismantles many blocks. People are drawn to individuals who lead without haste and without force. Clear decision-making generates emotional safety because it reduces chaos. Research on attraction shows that behavioral clarity diminishes anxiety and increases the sense of trust. An indecisive person creates noise. An overly aggressive person creates threat. The person who leads calmly creates an environment conducive to mutual engagement. This engagement is not rational, it is instinctual. The practical application lies in leading rhythm, environment, and transition. It is choosing the next step naturally. It is moving first without announcement. It is approaching when the moment calls for closeness without theatrics and without a hidden plea for approval. It is reading the other's body language carefully and adjusting, not retreating out of fear. When you act this way, leadership need not be explained, it is felt. And when it is felt, it often meets not with resistance, but with response. The individual who develops this implicit direction ceases to be a reactive participant and becomes the axis of the experience. They do not accelerate to prove something, nor do they slow down from insecurity. They guide with appropriate timing. In that space, the other party perceives something fundamental. They do not need to carry the interaction. There is someone present who sustains the path. And to the human psyche, this is not merely attractive, it is deeply reassuring. Conclusion: the individual who chooses is often sought. Most believe creating connection is about saying the right words, acting confident, or making a grand effort at the perfect moment. Yet, despite their attempts, it often fails. Interest fades, attraction doesn't deepen, and desire rarely develops sustainably. The reason is evident. People do not respond to isolated actions or clever lines. They respond to the consistent mindset an individual embodies. Connection is drawn to those who demonstrate lasting value, quiet confidence, and self-governance, not those constantly trying to impress. The brain registers how a person moves, reacts, and whether they remain composed rather than being controlled by the situation. Attraction isn't about one single act. It grows from who a person is over time, even in uneventful moments. This is why rehearsed lines fail, appearance alone is insufficient, and overexertion often backfires. People notice posture, energy, calmness, and steady presence far more than words alone. An individual who tries too hard signals pursuit. But an individual who maintains their inner state often becomes a choice, not a chase. Desire develops when they show consistent command over their mind, emotions, and energy, even in quiet, ordinary moments. Few achieve this because it demands self-discipline, emotional intelligence, and awareness of social dynamics, not just temporary confidence. Use cognitive tension and managed ambiguity. One of the most misunderstood aspects of attraction is how desire develops cognitively. Many assume desire grows when everything is clear, every signal obvious, and interest shown openly. The truth is different. Desire does not thrive in total clarity or certainty. It thrives in tension, curiosity, and the spaces where the mind must work to interpret what it observes. A foundational psychological principle explains this well. Psychic energy, the energy of mind and emotion, naturally moves toward what is unresolved. Humans are instinctively drawn to situations, people, and experiences that are not fully explained, not completely understood, that leave questions unanswered. When something is open-ended or ambiguous, the mind wants to analyze, interpret, and make sense of it. This energy fuels curiosity, imagination, and ultimately, attraction. Many make the mistake of believing that showing clear, immediate interest creates security and comfort. They think if the other person knows exactly how they feel, the connection will strengthen. However, the opposite is often true. When everything is explained too soon, the brain experiences closure. Closure leads to relaxation, and in this context, relaxation can cause nascent desire to fade. The nervous system does not respond with excitement when a situation is entirely predictable. Instead, desire is sparked when there is something to interpret, something that creates mental engagement and emotional investment. Controlled ambiguity, therefore, plays a central role. It is not about hiding feelings or being intentionally confusing. It is about maintaining a state of openness and thoughtful unpredictability that keeps the mind engaged. When ambiguity exists, the brain continues to process information, replay interactions, and imagine possibilities. This mental activity creates psychological energy, felt even after the interaction ends. It is subtle but powerful because attraction often begins and develops in the space between words, in the pauses, and in what is left unsaid. Science supports this. Studies show that unresolved curiosity activates the brain's dopamine system. Dopamine is associated with anticipation, reward, and pleasure. Crucially, dopamine responds most strongly to contrast when there is uncertainty, tension, or something to anticipate. Predictable outcomes, complete explanations, and immediate clarity do not activate this system to the same degree. When everything is given too quickly, desire lacks the opportunity to build. When some elements remain open to interpretation, the mind continues to engage, and attraction deepens naturally. Desire, therefore, is not a simple reaction to actions, words, or appearances. It is a complex mental and emotional process arising from internal engagement. The human brain seeks patterns, makes sense of information, and fills gaps. When someone maintains a subtle sense of ambiguity, the mind cannot fully rest. It wants to explore, question, and imagine. Desire often feels strongest when the interaction is mentally stimulating, when curiosity is piqued, and when the mind is respectfully challenged. This concept is rooted in evolution. Our ancestors relied on careful observation and interpretation of social and environmental cues for survival. Humans developed sensitivity to subtle signals indicating value, status, and compatibility. Today, that same sensitivity influences connection. People are naturally drawn to those who provoke thought, who are not fully understood at first glance, and who inspire the mind to seek answers. Ambiguity and cognitive tension are thus not manipulative tricks. They are natural triggers of attention and interest. Cognitive tension also creates mental investment. When the brain is stimulated by ambiguity, it begins actively working to understand the other person. This internal processing forges an emotional link stronger than what clarity alone often achieves. Desire is not just a reaction to external behavior. It is a reflection of ongoing mental engagement occurring long after an interaction ends. This is why subtle psychological dynamics often matter more than visible actions. Desire grows in the spaces between certainty and uncertainty, where the mind is active and the imagination free. This principle explains why attraction can persist without immediate reinforcement. The mind continues to process unresolved cues, replay moments, and imagine scenarios. The result is lingering curiosity and growing desire that feels effortless because it is generated internally, not through constant external prompting. Cognitive tension acts as a powerful engine for attraction, creating continuous mental engagement that draws people naturally, without forced effort or over-explanation. In conclusion, desire is not born solely from clarity or certainty. It is born from managed ambiguity, curiosity, and unresolved mental tension. When a person leaves space for interpretation, allows the mind to remain engaged, and creates interactions that are not immediately predictable, attraction grows organically. This is a subtle but powerful aspect of human psychology, showing that desire is more about how the brain processes signals over time than about isolated actions or words. Position yourself as the choice, not the applicant. Most believe attraction comes from doing or saying the right things at the right time. They think the perfect line, displayed confidence, or a bold move will automatically draw notice. But the truth is deeper. Real attraction does not come from single actions. It comes from an individual's overall state, their presence, and how they naturally carry themselves. Being the choice is not about trying to impress. It's about who you are and how you present yourself without strain. An individual consistently aligned with their own energy, calm in action, and steady in presence naturally stands out. This is because people do not respond primarily to attempts. They respond to patterns. They notice how you occupy space, how you react to situations, and whether you are guided by your own direction or by the environment. As noted in works on influence, a person who appears to choose is often perceived as more attractive than one who appears to chase. This is not arrogance. It is an absence of conspicuous need. When an individual is free from the pressure of approval, when they do not contort their energy to fit others' expectations, they signal high value and stability. They become someone the environment adjusts around, rather than someone who adjusts to everything. This difference is subtle but instinctively felt. It is picked up almost instantly, often before a single word is spoken. Research shows that humans make judgments about social value, competence, and leadership within fractions of a second. These judgments are based on body language, posture, rhythm, and energy, not verbal content. When an individual enters a space with natural confidence, upright posture, calm movements, and balanced energy, they communicate something specific. They are grounded, stable, and in command of themselves. These are preverbal markers of value the brain interprets automatically. Being the choice is not about being flashy, loud, or dramatic. It is about internal alignment, a quiet power emanating from confidence that is steady, not performative. This is why some who seem ordinary in appearance can attract significant attention. They carry themselves in a way that naturally signals choice. Conversely, Even conventionally attractive individuals who are anxious, needy, or inconsistent often fail to inspire deep attraction because their internal state betrays them. People are wired to evaluate consistency over time. One impressive action cannot override the patterns instinctively perceived. The individual who consistently projects stability, calmness, and self-possession is interpreted as someone of high value, not because of what they say, but because of how they exist. This is a biological response. The brain notices those who can maintain their state and occupy space without being overly influenced by external chaos. A person who positions themselves as the choice does not pursue validation. They do not seek approval or react anxiously to surrounding reactions. They exist as their own reference point. Their behavior communicates freedom from need, and neediness is one of the strongest disqualifiers in attraction. By maintaining this state consistently, they are perceived as someone with options, someone who is not desperate, someone who naturally draws attention. This form of attraction is silent and instinctive. It does not rely on clever words or one-time actions. Instead, it is a continuous signal, a subtle yet powerful impression communicating self-possession. It awakens interest without visible effort and inspires desire without direct provocation. This difference is noticed at a deep level and shapes how one's presence and potential are perceived. In essence, positioning yourself as the choice is about identity, not performance. It is about becoming an individual whose value is perceived automatically through natural alignment, calm energy, and the ability to observe rather than chase. This is why those who master this are often perceived as magnetic. They do not need to try to create desire. Desire emerges because of the state they consistently embody. By understanding this principle, it becomes clear why many superficial tactics fail. Lines, bold gestures, or surface-level confidence cannot replace the natural perception of an individual who is internally consistent and self-directed. People respond not to attempts, but to presence. They respond not to chasing, but to steady, assured choice. An individual who occupies this space does not force attraction. They allow it to arise organically through their consistent state. That is what makes them compelling. This is just the surface. If you want the complete system, the advanced psychological frameworks, the body language blueprints, the exact protocols for conversation and escalation that we can't cover in a single video, you need to go deeper. The link to our full, intensive training is in the description below. This isn't free content, it's the masterclass. Stop guessing and start knowing. Click the link now. Show emotional mastery. Emotional mastery is one of the most powerful yet overlooked aspects of sustained attraction. It is the ability to remain calm, composed, and in control of yourself regardless of external circumstances. This skill is not about pretending confidence or performing. It is about genuinely governing your emotions and maintaining stability. Emotional mastery is subconsciously recognized and communicates qualities the human mind finds deeply compelling. Every social interaction contains unpredictable moments, a challenging comment, an awkward pause, a situation provoking tension. In these moments, how a person responds, or doesn't, speaks volumes. Someone who stays grounded, calm, and measured signals self-control. This is interpreted as strength and stability. Observers recognize this immediately, even subconsciously. Studies demonstrate that people assess status, confidence, and emotional strength through subtle cues. The ability to remain steady amid uncertainty is a universal indicator of maturity and social competence. Those appearing emotionally balanced are often perceived as leaders, individuals who can navigate life without being ruled by momentary impulses. This perception isn't about superiority. It's about demonstrating control over oneself rather than being controlled by events. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing feelings. It is about being aware of your emotions and letting them exist without letting them dictate behavior. Many make the mistake of trying to immediately fix tension, smooth over awkwardness, or respond too quickly to challenges. This often creates visible anxiety, nervousness, or overcompensation, which the brain interprets as instability. Instead of appearing attractive, these behaviors can signal vulnerability and a lack of self-control. In contrast, emotional mastery conveys that a person can navigate social unpredictability without losing balance. From an evolutionary perspective, Humans are wired to recognize indicators of stability and control. A person demonstrating consistent emotional mastery is perceived as someone who can provide a sense of security and guidance. These qualities are biologically rooted. When the environment becomes unpredictable, someone with emotional mastery does not panic. They maintain a calm that reassures others on an instinctive level. This reassurance creates a magnetic effect, drawing attention and respect. Visible emotional control also signals developed self-awareness and maturity. It indicates experience with challenges, reflection on reactions, and learned governance over emotional responses. This stability is compelling because it demonstrates the capacity to handle stress, navigate difficulty, and remain composed when others might falter. It is a quiet strength needing no announcement. Importantly, emotional mastery creates an environment of safety. The brain constantly evaluates social surroundings, and emotional volatility signals potential risk. By remaining composed, someone practicing emotional mastery communicates that the environment is safe, predictable, and secure. This safety allows others to relax and engage without fear of negative escalation, fostering deeper connection and trust. Where there is instinctive safety, interest and attraction have space to develop. Emotional mastery distinguishes individuals perceived as genuinely confident from those relying on superficial traits. Many assume confidence is about appearance, resources, or charm. Real confidence is demonstrated through emotional consistency. Someone maintaining calm and composure during uncertainty signals inner stability and a lack of need for external validation. This internal equilibrium is read instantly and often has greater impact than words, gestures, or external signals. In relationships, emotional mastery is critical for creating intrigue and respect. It is not about manipulation or control, nor about detachment. It is about sustaining a presence that is solid, reliable, and attractive at a subconscious level. The consistent display of emotional balance communicates that a person can manage challenges without losing themselves. This creates a magnetic effect, drawing others closer. Ultimately, emotional mastery is one of the most profound signals of attraction. It demonstrates leadership, stability, maturity, and control, qualities appealing because they align with deep human instincts for safety, guidance, and reliability. Those cultivating this inner steadiness are read as high-value individuals, not because of isolated words or actions, but because of the consistent state they embody. This state of calm authority, subtle strength, and composed presence creates an environment where interest, respect, and attraction can grow organically, without need for effortful lines or tricks. By focusing on emotional mastery, an individual becomes naturally perceived as desirable. The power lies in subtlety. It is not performed, forced, or displayed overtly. It exists quietly within, guiding reactions and creating an aura of reliability. Over time, this presence is instinctively interpreted as an indicator of value, security, and attraction, making emotional mastery one of the most effective and lasting foundations for influence and connection. Desire is created by your state, not your effort. The concealed truth about attraction is this: people do not fall for lines, tricks, or performances. They are drawn to individuals who consistently demonstrate 1. Psychological positioning, being the chooser, not the pursuer. 2. Cognitive tension, maintaining curiosity and engagement through managed ambiguity. 3. Emotional mastery, staying calm, stable, and in control. When these three elements align naturally, connection happens automatically. You cease trying to impress and start being perceived as authentically compelling. Individuals who master this don't chase validation, rush interactions, or feel compelled to fix the atmosphere. They remain grounded while the environment adjusts around them. And when the environment adjusts, desire grows organically. This is the difference between forcing interest and inspiring attraction. Real connection isn't a set of moves. It's a state of being that people instinctively respond to. For years, many have tried to understand interaction by observing media, following generic advice, listening to uninformed opinions, or repeating phrases that sound good but prove ineffective. They tried to be kinder, more available, more accommodating. And the more they aimed to please, the more confused they became by the responses. Not because they were doing too little, but because they were playing a game based on assumptions, not observable reality. Evolutionary psychology made this clear long ago. People do not respond to what you think is correct. They respond to what your behavior communicates on an instinctive level. Research shows that preferences are shaped by specific signals of safety, social competence, and emotional control, not by excessive effort, emotional submission, or a constant quest for approval. The human brain does not reward the person who adapts too much. It responds to the person who sustains their own structure. The most common modern error is confusing treating someone well with diminishing oneself, believing that avoiding conflict, constant agreement, and placing another at the center of your life is proof of maturity. In practice, this often triggers the opposite of what is intended. Kindness without a backbone can be perceived as weakness. Attention without discernment can read as neediness. Accommodating behavior can communicate insecurity, not value. Treating someone well is not about pleasing. It is about positioning yourself so that human instinct recognizes direction. There is a critical difference between a respectful individual and one with no emotional spine. Reality does not reward the latter. Treating well, at the level that truly matters, means acting in accordance with observable mechanisms of human behavior. It is understanding how presence, posture, decisions, and reactions shape how you are perceived, not just heard. When you understand this, you stop guessing and start acting with clarity. Final call to action. You've just experienced a fraction of the framework, the full architecture, the step-by-step system for internal state control, the exact behavioral models, the troubleshooting for any social scenario, is structured into a comprehensive program. This isn't about tips, it's about transformation. The link to that program is in the description. If you're serious about changing your reality, you need the complete picture. Click the link. Invest in your understanding. Your future self will account for this decision. Before you go, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with one person who needs to hear it. This knowledge only has power if it spreads. Let's build this community. Now take what you've learned and go apply it.